super excited about that. And it looks like it's just about time for us to officially get started. Welcome to today's webinar, Improve Writing Skills, Track Progress, and Save Time with a free Google add-on brought to you by Simple K-12. My name is Lori, and I am here with Jason Carroll, and we are so excited to have all of you here with us today. Now, this webinar is brought to you free today thanks to our sponsor, Text Help, the makers of Raikou, a free writing assessment add-on for Google Docs. Text Help creates smart, user-friendly literacy and learning solutions that provide the support each student needs through reading, writing, math, and research. Now, just a little bit about our presenter. Jason Carroll is the Global Products Manager at Text Help, where he provides training for educators on the effective use of educational technology. Now, he holds an MBA as a graduate of the Assistive Technology Application Certificate Program from California State University at Northridge. He's a Google educator and an authorized Google education trainer. Jason, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, Lori, thanks so much. Good to be here.
I'll go ahead and pass the screen to you.
Okay.
All right, looks great. We're good to go.
All right, just get in presentation mode there. All right, well, hey, thanks so much. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to come and join me today. Just going to talk a bit about how you can improve writing skills, track progress, and save time with an awesome tool for Google. As Lori has already mentioned, I'm Jason. If you need to get a hold of me during or after the presentation, you can always find me on Twitter, or you have my email address there as well. Also, I have a few slides here. I'm not going to spend loads of time on slides. I'm going to show you guys some cool stuff. But I do have a few to go through. If this is something you're interested in, you can always get access to this presentation at the short code that I have there. That is case sensitive. But after this as well, there'll be a follow-up email I'm sure that will be sent out. And in that, you'll be able to get a link to the slides there as well. Should also quickly mention a little bit about Text Help. Text Help has been around for over 20 years making literacy supports. One of the more popular ones is Read and Write for Google. So we've been a Google education partner for a little over 3 years now. We have lots of our customers use Google Apps for education, or now I guess it's G Suite for education. And with our Read and Write product, for example, I just checked, we have over 11 million users using that, so it's quite popular. And Raikou is something I'm going to be talking a bit about today, which is one of our newer offerings that I think you guys will really enjoy. And it's a totally free Google add-on. So I look forward to talking a bit more about that. So here's the problem that we're trying to solve and that we see often. Scoring student writing, it's time consuming and it's tedious work. And, you know, depending on what it is you do on a day-to-day basis, you know, if you're in a classroom with 30 students and you've got 4 classes, they're each writing papers, and you have to review those papers and then hand them back and then review again and all these kind of things. It just takes time, and it's a complicated. It can be a complicated thing to do. I used to teach at a local university, and that was always one of the things I felt that I spent a lot of time on, and it's very hard not even to do that because it is a time-consuming task, but to give the same amount of effort for each paper that it is that you may be looking at or grading over time. It gets more and more difficult to continue giving the same amount of effort for each one. On top of that, at least in the US, and it also extends beyond the US, of course, but we know just from data here that if you look at grade 8 and grade 12 students, you can also look at younger age students, but very few of them, only a quarter of them are what we would call proficient in writing. And then so because of that, it's no surprise that students that aren't proficient on writing, who score low on writing, say that writing is one of their least favorite activities. So there are some things we can do about that and kind of to help with that over time to look at it. And we can do some of those things through technology. One thing we found are some metrics that we can look at and over time tell, depending on those metrics, if a student is progressing in their writing or if they're staying the same or kind of where they're at. One of the things that's important to know when it comes to writing is one of the ways to get better, obviously, is with practice. But I always say that, you know, some people say practice makes perfect. Could be true. I always say practice makes permanent. And what that means is if students are practicing, but they're not getting the right feedback in a timely manner, they could be practicing doing the wrong things over and over, which is going to only increase the likelihood that they continue to do the wrong things over and over. So it's real important that we have ways that we can not only assess the student and how they're doing and have some common metrics to look at, but also give them timely feedback on that and let them know how they were doing, or even let them calculate that on their own. Some of those things we look at are some of the obvious, the percent of errors. So we're thinking of spelling and punctuation and grammar. How many errors are they making? What types of errors are they making? Are they making more or less errors over time? Those are quite important. Also, the maturity of the vocabulary that they're using. Are they using vocabulary that's at their level, above their level, below their level? Is that getting better or worse over time? A couple of things we also looked at that there's a bit of research behind are correct word sequences. And that's just basically whenever a student is writing, a sequences would be, any two words would be a sequence. And anytime there's an error with those words, that would create an incorrect sequence. And that's just kind of a number that we can calculate and keep track of over time to kind of judge a student's writing progress. And it's not only one of these things that we would look at, it's just a lot of these things combined. So I'm going to show you some kind of nifty ways that we can do that through the free Google add-on that I had referenced there. Something to think about, though, if we're talking about errors, the number of spelling errors and grammar errors, there's an important concept that we need to consider. And anytime we're looking at writing, it can't only be about punctuation and grammar and those sort of things, because I'm sure we've all come across circumstances that may be an error-free piece of writing, but it's still not very good. So that's where things like rubrics come in. We want to know the quality, not only the quantity of words they've written or pages they've written or mistakes they've made, but we want to know the quality of that writing as well. And so any kind of writing assessment tool or guidance tool that we're going to use, we need to make sure there's something in there to give us an indicator of the quality of the writing as well. And this is where Raikou comes in. So Raikou, as mentioned, is a totally free Google add-on. This is just a screenshot of it here. I'll show you a couple of bullet points so you get an overview of what Raikou is. But really, I just wanted to take some time today to dive in and make sure everyone knows how to get it for free and how to use it and how to get a hold of us if you have any questions with it. But on the positive side of things, here's just a few notes. And again, you'll have access to all these slides if you would like them after this. But Raikou is a completely free teacher tool. You can use it directly in Google Docs. So often we find that, well, if a student is obviously writing, handwriting and turns something in, then you're going to be there with your writing pen and making errors and suggestions and things like that and providing that back to students. But a lot of times with technology, we've got to copy that text that they made and paste it into some other area to go and get scoring done and things like that. But what I'm going to show you today is you're going to use it right in Google Docs, right where the students are typing at. No copy and pasting requiring. There's no creating accounts and logins and complex onboarding processes and entering your students and all that kind of stuff. It just uses your Google login. So if you're a school using G Suite for Education, it's super easy to use. It's going to automatically score several of those key writing indicators that I mentioned earlier, such as vocabulary maturity, correct word sequences, that sort of stuff. It's also going to track stuff like time on task, which is an interesting metric to look at. And as mentioned, you've got to also look at the quality of any writing in addition to the quantity of words and those sort of things. So we'll have friendly rubrics in there that's going to be available as well. And last but not least, a nice teacher dashboard so that after you score students' writing and give them feedback, you're going to have that log somewhere so that you can go back and check progress over time. So all this stuff is part of Raikou. As fun as it is to sit there and read bullet points to you, I think it's best if I can actually show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to just escape out of this presentation. I'm going to go to my Google Drive account. I see lots of people have hopped in to kind of view along with the slides there. I always crack up at some of the names that they give. So Anonymous Wombat, very clever, good stuff. So I'm going to go to my Google Drive account. I'm already just in a folder with some demo documents of writing that's been completed. So in this case, if you're a Google Apps or a G Suite user, students will be using Google Docs to type whatever it is that they may be writing, or you may share a prompt with those students. They'll respond to that prompt and share that back with you. You just open that up. So in this case, here's an old blog post that was done by my colleague Kathleen, and I can click on that. Note there may be a couple of errors in here that she intentionally put in just so Raikou would pick something up. I'm sure she already ran Raikou on it to start with there. So here's the Google Doc that I've opened, and it's got its title at the top. It's ready to go. here's the thing about add-ons, if you're not familiar with them. So Google has several things that they offer. You have Google Apps, you have Google Extensions, and you have Google Add-ons. Now, an extension would be like these things that I have at the top of my the top of my browser here that I can use on any page that I'm on. So here's Read and Write, for example. It's a little literacy toolbar I can use on any site that I hop into. You can also have apps. So apps are you usually have a link to apps, and if you open an app up, an app pretty much takes up one tab of your window. It's almost like its own site. Google Docs is itself is an app. Remember, it used to be called Google Apps for Education. So Google Docs is an app. It takes up one kind of whole screen here, or one whole tab. And then last but not least are add-ons. And the idea with add-ons are specific to the Google app that you're using. So there are add-ons for Google Docs, and there are add-ons for Google Sheets and Google Slides, and there are even add-ons for Google Forms now. So if you've never used add-ons before, experimented with them, you should give them a try. There's some great add-ons, especially for Docs and Sheets. And the way to do that is just to click add-ons, and then I have several already here installed. But you go down and click Get Add-ons. And then by doing that, you'll see a list of several add-ons that are available. And today we're going to be using Raikou. So you can scroll around here, you see it. So you can scroll around until you find Raikou, or you can just type. You can type Raikou, hit enter, and you'll see it pop up. And then from there, you can just click on it and install it. Now, once it's installed, you'll get a little pop-up that says, hey, a new add-on's been added. Click here to find it. Click on add-ons, go to Raikou, click Show Raikou, and then just give it a moment and it'll pop up. Now, again, if you haven't used add-ons before, they all pop up on the sidebar, just like this, in whatever application it is that you're using, whether it's Docs or Sheets or Slides. And it does a couple of things. Now, part of this is it's difficult for me to show you because I've already logged in. But the very first time you use Raikou, it asks you some questions. And it's not us being nosy by any means. It's that we need to know the answers to these questions to help you whenever you're scoring these documents. So first, we want to know if you're a teacher or a student. If you're a student, we don't collect any information at all. If you're a teacher, we just want to know what grades you teach, what state you're in, those sort of things, so that we can so we can give you some of this information up front and better provide you with some assistance later on in the process. So here I said I'm a teacher, and I said that I teach grade 5. No big deal if you teach multiple grades or work with students across grade levels. You can always change the grade. But because we're using Google Docs, in this case, Kathleen wrote this document. I know that Kathleen wrote this document because Google knows that. Google keeps a revision history of every edit ever made. It even says here the last edit was made 5 hours ago by Kathleen. I put she's in grade 5. If she's not, I can always change that to a different grade, no problem at all. And then it's important that we choose the genre. So the three main genres are listed, whether that be narrative or an informative piece or an opinion, argumentative piece. You choose the one that best fits what it is that the student may be writing there, and then you simply click Score this document. Now there's a piece here, don't forget this piece that says Go to Dashboard. That's going to be very important later. Clicking on Score this document is going to bring up a new window, and it's going to take the text that the student has typed, pop it into this window, and give us a few metrics. Now, currently the Raikou score is just the % of error-free, so 97 is pretty good. I wouldn't call this the score of a document by any means. It's just a kind of measurement that we have in there now that over time will probably get better and better, reflective of what the writing shows. But you're going to see some other stuff that's kind of normal. It's just nice when you put it all together, how you get this one picture. So you see the word count, which is obviously easy enough to get, but you also get your sentence count. You get your words per sentence, which is an interesting metric to track. It helps you know maybe if there could be a lot of run-on sentences and those sort of things. Vocabulary maturity age, this is actually in age, so this would be roughly 11, the maturity age of an 11-year-old, which really, it's not even recommended when you're out on the web to make websites much more complex to that. Now, obviously, if you're in high school and you're doing some real content-specific stuff, this vocabulary maturity age is going to increase with the complexity of that content. It's going to show you the amount of correct word sequences and incorrect word sequences. That's what I was mentioning before. There's some research behind and tracking as far as quality of writing goes. If you look, there are a few errors that have been marked here. You'll see that between words, there are these little kind of rectangular columns. And that's basically would represent a sequence. So here it says that ATIA is a spelling error. It's just not in the dictionary. That's no big deal. We can clear that because that's correct in this case. Because ATIA is marked as an error, it's created 2 incorrect word sequences. You see one here and one here. But since this is not really an error, I can click on it, clear error, and now you'll see that will immediately change. Now, if you go along and see an error somewhere that Raikou didn't catch, you can simply click on it, mark the type of error it is, and that will update as well. It's important that you do this for multiple reasons. One, so you're going to be giving accurate feedback and have accurate reporting and those sort of things. But 2, Raikou learns. The more that educators agree or disagree with the types of errors that are there, the better it gets at recognizing those errors in the future. So once you're happy with that, you can see that you can click next. It also collects time spent writing. What Kathleen has done here is she has copied and pasted this doc into a new doc. She's done a few updates on it and spent approximately 12 minutes in there. If I saw a couple of pages worth of writing, and I saw it was only 10 or 12 minutes, that may raise some flags as well that you would want to look into. But again, Google Docs always keeps that nice revision history that you can check into to see if something was copy and pasted or what happened there. There's also a little key to help you with that as well. So I'll click next. And after I click next, it brings me to a rubric. Now, the idea behind the rubric, there is a specific rubric that is created for each grade level at each genre. So you've got grades 1 through 12, and for each grade level, there's a rubric that goes along with each of the genres that I mentioned earlier. These rubrics have some sub areas. So in this example for 5th grade informative, we're looking at focus, organization, evidence, and language. And if I were to expand these, you'll see there are a couple of sub areas that we need to select. Now, you can do this a couple of ways. One, you can go in and read those. Okay, that's at grade level, maybe above grade level on this piece. But you could also, once you get used to these kind of things, you can also just click the high level one. So let's say this is at grade level, and it will automatically select any of the sub criteria that go along with that, in this case, organization. So, and then you can, if one didn't exactly match, you could go through and do that as well. So there's organization, evidence, and support. Again, I'll look at a few, and then I'll say the language is just at grade level. So once I have all that, I click save. Again, that rubric's going to be different depending on what the genre and the grade level is. And then this gives me this kind of summary screen of what happened. It shows me the number of grammar errors and punctuation. It's got the percent of error-free, the total number of words, the maturity, how much time I spent, the rubric score based on a 4-point scale based off these things. And then when I'm ready, I can just go and write my feedback here. If there's anything else, I can say, nice work. Be sure to cite sources, or any amount of text that you want to put in there, up to 256 characters. Once done, you hit confirm. It's going to close away that screen. Then it will take away the other screen as well. You're right back in the doc, and it inserts that feedback right into the document, and it'll highlight any of those grammar or any other areas that it picked up. Now, you can also go in and you can use your Google comments and all that kind of stuff just as well. If there was another comment that you wanted to make, that's very easy to do, just like you would always make Google comments. That's going to be there now for a student. So the next time a student comes in, they're going to open up their doc and they're going to see this feedback and any error they make, and then they can go through and make edits from there and resubmit to you. You can go and rescore the document if you would like and update the scores and all that sort of stuff. So while that's on one end of it, another kind of really important part of this is that once you've given the feedback, now you can go to the dashboard. And so once you go to the dashboard, you're going to have your very own dashboard that's going to show recent activity that occurred. But then you can also go and click on students. You can see any student that you've ever scored any writing for. So here's Kathleen, for example. I can click on Kathleen. Here's all the documents that I've ever scored for Kathleen. And it's got the score, which in this case is the percent of error-free. And here it gives me some data that I can go and look at and measure Kathleen's progress over time. I can adjust those timelines if I would like. to only show me the last 30 days or the whole calendar year or whatever it may be for there. So that's kind of how you're going to measure progress over time with Raikou. Now, the idea is that Raikou is a super simple add-on that doesn't require a lot of settings. It doesn't require user logins, all that kind of stuff for you to track progress over time. I want to flip back to a couple of slides to give you an idea of where all this is heading, because what I'm showing you now is completely free, and it's going to stay completely free forever. So good value there, I believe. So that brings me to talk about what's next. We can already take these documents and get kind of the grammar and punctuation and correct word sequences and maturity and all that kind of stuff. We can get all that logged and reported. Then we can go in and do the quality stuff with the rubrics. And then, so what are we going to do with it over time now that we can track progress? Well, there's a couple of things. In reading, for example, you may be familiar with Lexile levels. And if I look at a Lexile level, that kind of tells me, well, it does. It tells me the complexity of that book that I may be reading. But there's not really something like Lexile levels when it comes to writing. So one thing that we're wanting to do here, and one reason why this is free, and one reason why we ask you the grade you teach and the state that you're in, is because we want to help with a set of national norms. We want to be able, because every single piece of writing that a student does, a teacher would go through and validate that, yeah, that's correct or that's incorrect, and here's the score on that. We want to be able to later say, hey, that's great. Here's where this 5th grade student scored, and then here's where this 5th grade student scored compared to others in the state and others in the nation. Depending on that, then give you some actionable information that you can take to improve that student's writing unless they're already way ahead of the curve. We also want to automate more. I'd mentioned about this being a time-consuming process. It is. Raikou should be able to quickly pick out most of the errors, but you'll need to skim through that and make sure it's correct, and we'll continue to improve that over time. But we want to be able to automatically take a stab at scoring the rubric side of things as well. And over time, the more and more people that use the rubrics, the better it'll make Raikou, and you'll always be able to change whatever the suggestion is, but it'll give Raikou the ability to actually go in and suggest scores for the rubrics as well. All that goes into what I just said in improving the results over time. The more it's used and the more people that do use it, the better it gets. And then in the future, we'll want to add additional options to Raikou as well. So for example, one of the things that's talked about most often is rubrics. Everybody likes rubrics, but a lot of people want to create their own rubrics or modify the rubrics. That'll be something that we'll probably add in a future version. But now, if our goal is to help establish national norms and to give you a more meaningful Raikou score other than just the % of error-free, for us to automate that scoring on the rubrics and get even better at automating the other ones, we need everybody to be using the same rubrics. So that's the reason that we do have a set of rubrics there that's specific to each grade level and each genre. And a little bit about the rubric as well. It's not just a random rubric that we chose. We did work with professors at the University of Central Florida to help come up with a very specific rubric that matches the grade level and the genre and those sort of things, so that it would be something that's applicable across most of the US and beyond when folks are using it. So that's Raikou. On these slides, which I'll make sure that everyone has access to, there is well, there's the whole question thing, but I've added a slide at the end where to find more information. Super difficult to sit through something for 20 minutes and see how something works, and then to go out and remember everything that was said and all the ins and outs. So I've got a link in here that will take you right to the add-on listing. And so if you're in a Google Doc, you can go to this add-on listing. That'll add it to your Google Docs. We've got several videos around using Raikou and all of our other literacy-related products that you'll find on our YouTube channel. We have a nice little intro video that explains it. And maybe you're someone that works with a lot of other teachers and you think they would find this to be useful. You can show them this quick intro video so they'll see how it works. And then, of course, occasionally you'll come up with questions or you're not sure how to do something. So we have a support site. Part of that support site is dedicated to Raikou. So you can go there and look up to answers to your most frequently asked questions. You can also always contact our support. I'll be sure to add that in here as well. It's just support@texthelp.com. So hopefully all those things make sense. I wanted to just throw this slide up as well, because if you do have questions on Raikou that I didn't answer here or can't answer in the next 4 minutes, we wanted to make sure you know how to get in touch with me as well. So Laurie, having said all that, I tried to leave it to where I had 4 or 5 minutes here in case there are specific questions or I need to show anything specific.
Okay, great. Jason, thank you so much for a wonderful presentation. I'll give you just a couple of moments to catch your breath, and then we'll take some Q&A from our attendees. So if you do have a question for Jason, please feel free to submit it now through that questions box of GoToWebinar. This webinar has been brought to you free today thanks to our sponsor, TextHelp, the makers of Raikou. TextHelp believes that literacy is every student's passport to success. TextHelp creates smart, user-friendly literacy and learning solutions that provide the support each student needs through reading, writing, math, and research. Raikou, a free add-on for Google Docs, automatically checks students' writing for spelling, punctuation, and grammar errors, and measures the age-appropriate use of sentence length, vocabulary, and correct and incorrect word sequences, giving educators a complete picture of each student's journey as an increasingly confident writer. Okay, Jason, had a few questions coming in here. Let's see. First question actually came in from the back channel that I saw. Do you know if there's any privacy issues associated with allowing access to all of your Google Docs when you're using an add-on?
Well, so it's going to depend on the add-on. For ours, there are certain permissions that are asked for any add-on or any extension, and a lot of those are just required by Google. Some of them can look quite scary, but you have to really think about what the add-on is doing, and from that, then look at the permissions and see if it makes sense. For example, Raikou will probably say, we need access to all your Google Drive and all your Google Docs and to make changes and things like that, and that sounds kind of scary. But if you see what Raikou does, it takes a snapshot of the text, so it has to see the doc. And then whenever the feedback is finished, it actually inserts an image into the doc, and it highlights certain words. So we actually have to have access to edit those things, which it'll be called also creating new docs and all that kind of stuff. It's all the same permission level. So there's really not, but for Raikou, but it'd be hard for me to make a blanket statement about any add-on. It's also important to know that the only information we would ever have on the student side of things would be that user ID. We don't have any of the text that links it to that student, and any user ID that we ever have stored is, we call it as de-identified, so it's completely scrambled, and it just looks like a line full of random numbers and letters that can never be attached back to a student. So on Raikou's end, quite safe, no privacy concerns, but it's definitely something to look into. Especially if you keep an eye on the news with all the privacy and security concerns when it comes to students that you would want to keep an eye on.
Right, agreed. Question from Sue. Actually, it was a comment, and I'm wondering if there is a possibility of maybe being able to use Raikou with other languages in the future?
Right, so currently it's only going to be UK and US English, and that mainly comes down to the grammar rules that are in place, or mostly in UK and US English, so you can imagine how complicated that gets whenever you're trying to figure out all the grammar rules for other languages. But yeah, the longer term answer to that is yes. The services we use for this, we use certain services for Raikou, and in addition, we write our own rules based off teacher feedback and things that something may not be picking up. So we hope to expand that to other languages, specifically Spanish and French and Portuguese in the near future, and maybe more.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Question from Jeff. Does Raikou integrate with a learning management gradebook so that scores are automatically added to the LMS gradebook?
No, it is not at this time. That could be something we could look into. We could also look at probably on that dashboard. I'm not sure what which LMS it is or student information system that you're using, but could probably make it a simple way to export like a CSV file with the data that you could import into it, maybe something like that as well. Currently, it does not integrate directly with any LMS.
Okay, great. Question from Mary. She said, awesome presentation. Does it catch plagiarism in any other way than what you said? Is there an add-on for that?
It does not. That's something we actually looked in on. I don't know that there is an add-on for it or not. At the moment, there are some free open source plagiarism checkers that are on the market, but I think they're more like websites you copy and paste text into and then see what it returns, which is pretty much just a Google search, I suppose. But I'm not aware if there is an add-on for that. But it's an interesting question, something to look into for sure.
Okay, great. Question from Carla. Do you have a list of the errors Raikou looks for in the writings?
I do not have a complete list because it is a really long list and there's a lot of technical jargon in there as well. But it's a good point. I could look at maybe putting together a kind of a simplified version of that and adding it as a support article. I'll actually take a note of that now because I'm sure that's a common question that comes up. And maybe if we can get something like that together, I'll add that as an article on our support site. And I've got a link there for support articles on that slide deck.
Okay, great. Question from Kim. Is this compatible with VoiceOver or JAWS or Window Eyes for the blind and visually impaired?
Good question. So the window itself that pops up, I would have to check. Now this is a teacher, so there's kind of two sides to this. The product itself, I'll have to check on the accessibility with screen readers. It's going to be, so Google Docs itself will definitely, work with VoiceOver. So if the student was using that to type, and then Raikou is a teacher tool that would then be used to assess that. But for teachers who are using screen readers, I don't have a good answer for you right now, but I can check on that to see the extent of the accessibility for it and send that back.
Okay. Question from Ruth. Is Raikou available for teachers working in schools outside of the U.S.?
Sure, it is. If your country is not listed, let me know. The only limitation there is it's going to be the language. But if you're outside of the U.S. and you're at an American school or a UK or U.S. school, when you first sign in, you'll see a country listing. Most of the countries, so if your country's not there, just send me an email and we'll get that country added. We actually just had to do that this week for a country.